officers go through the house. This time, it's different. They enter the house and they hear playing in the background classical music. And that's what Rachel would put on to help her little girl, Lily, fall asleep. So the first thing they hear is this kind of soft classical music playing in the background. And then they detect a foul odor in the air. And they immediately know it's the smell of death. They start to make their way upstairs. The music is louder. The smell is very strong. And then they go to the master bedroom where there is no doubt that the smell of death is in the air. They pull back a pile of sheets and a comforter, and they see a mother and child, arm in arm, dead.
At that time, there was no obvious signs of foul play. We are interested in...
When the story broke the following morning, investigators knew more than they were telling.
Then in the process of locating Neil Entwistle, who authorities believe is traveling
in the country or out of the country.
Not going to comment.
Police had already called Boston's Logan Airport. At 8:15 on Saturday morning, Neil Entwistle had left with a one-way ticket to Britain. He landed at Heathrow at 7 in the evening. In a rented car, he first drove north to York, then returned south, heading for his parents' house in Worksop. At 7:30 in the morning of Monday the 23rd, he arrived home. In the hours that followed, his parents, Clifford, an ex-miner and a local councillor, his mother Yvonne, a school dinner lady, became rapidly aware that their son was a wanted man.
The top stories in the East Midlands tonight: a mother and daughter shot dead and an international manhunt underway for the father.
Neil Entwistle's parents are now waiting for him to hopefully come forward and shed...
What reporters didn't realise was that Neil Entwistle was already inside the house just a few feet away, where he poured out his extraordinary 2-hour story to Trooper Manning.
I don't know what I'm thinking at the moment. It's almost because I'm here, it doesn't even seem real. It's just a...
Well, let me...
void.
Yeah, well, let me tell you, it is real. Okay?
Yeah.
And, it is real. And something happened over here. And I'm trying to get as much information as I can.
I was devastated because it came out of the blue. I heard it on the radio. Funnily enough, her letter was sitting on my desk waiting for a reply at the time. So I went across almost to double check that the names were right, that the surnames and the Christian names all married up with the news item. And the shock just got worse. It was just unbelievable and horrible.
A bullet had gone through Lillian and into Rachel's left breast. But an X-ray revealed something more astonishing. Rachel had also been shot in the head, though the bullet hole had gone completely unnoticed by crime scene investigators. Instead of a single gunshot, there'd been 2.
Joe and Priscilla believed that their son-in-law was a good guy. When they realized that he had gone back to England is when their eyebrows raised up, and now they wanted some answers.
Mr. Entwistle, will you somebody making a statement?
Mr. Entwistle, do you believe your son is a killer?
Neil Entwistle remained holed up in his parents' house. Eventually, the reporters spotted their target.
Would you like to say something about your family, Neil?
Are you going to the States, Neil?
He wasn't returning to America. In his absence, 2 weeks after the shooting, Rachel and Lillian were buried in a single coffin.
When word came back from England that Neil Entwistle was not going to be at the funeral, that was a turning point in this case. It spoke a lot. He did not want to step foot back in America.
Five days after the funeral, on February the 6th, Neil Entwistle suddenly quit his parents' house. Police in this country had feared he'd go on the run.
We were concerned that he was going to abscond, but we hadn't received a formal request from the American authorities. That takes time, and it took us to February the 8th when they formally requested his extradition. By that stage, he had left his parents' address. We didn't know where he was, although on the 8th of February we did receive intelligence to say that he was staying with a friend in West London, sleeping on his sofa. We missed him by a matter of minutes.
Detectives were told that Neil and his friend had left, heading for Ladbroke Grove tube station.
We again missed him as he had just left on a train.
It's not certain where he was heading, though his train was now only 2 stops from mainline Paddington Station.
We managed to get that train stopped at Royal Oak with the doors closed. We went up to him. He was very calm, didn't offer any resistance, and he is searched at the scene of his arrest. In particular, he had a letter addressed, a draft letter addressed to his parents. It says, "I cannot take being made to feel much worse than I already do. I know how to keep myself safe, don't worry. You can tell people that I'm staying with friends to get some space." So that indicates to us that he was likely to go into hiding.
Police in America had by now assembled a powerful case, painting Neil Entwistle as a murderer. But his trial jury would hear a truly shocking alternative.
As horrible as it may be to hear, or even to think about, it was Rachel who did this terrible, terrible thing.
They'd called themselves the Happy Family and seemed to be living the American dream. Now, Neil Entwistle stood accused of murdering his wife and 9-month-old baby daughter. He would face a succession of court appearances before his trial in June 2008. The defense team had an extreme strategy. Neil Entwistle wouldn't testify, nor would he call any witnesses.
Neil had an absolute right to remain silent and to force the state, force the prosecution to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt.
But he couldn't remain totally silent because of that phone call with Trooper Bob Manning, recorded just 3 days after the killings.
So he said that if we talk about stuff, I'm going to take notes on what we talk about.
Did he indicate whether he had any difficulty with that?
No, he said he understood.
When the day came when we were going to hear the 2-hour conversation between Trooper Manning and Neil Entwistle, there was just such a heightened tension in the court. You could hear a pin drop.
And then as I got closer, I could see the blood, and I pulled the covers back, and
It's the first time and the only time you hear Neil Entwistle say anything, and it's just gripping.
Okay, if I just walk you through kind of how I got to this situation. It was Friday morning.
He said that on that Friday morning, he'd left Rachel and Lillian sleeping to drive to a local shopping mall. He needed some computer equipment, but he didn't find what he was looking for. And so he returned home. The house was quiet, except for the sound of classical music. A radio in Lillian's bedroom was tuned to a Boston classic station night and day as a comforter. It was when he looked inside the master bedroom that he saw the bodies of his wife and daughter.
You knew your wife and daughter were dead in the bed, but did you know what happened to them?
Do you mean as in being shot?
Is that what happened?
That's what I think. I mean, I saw it on Lily.
And where did you see it on Lily?
Kind of on the chest.
And what did you see?
There was like a hole. Kind of like a burn mark hole.
Mm-hmm. And what did you see on your wife?
I didn't see anything on Rachel.
What did you think happened to her?
Well, I just assumed the same.
His story grew more bizarre. Instead of calling for help, he said that, in a state of shock, he drove to his in-laws' house 50 miles away in the town of Carver in order to commit suicide.
I know that Joe has guns in the house.
Okay.
And I did think that if I went to their house, I could load the gun and shoot myself.
You wanted to go to their house to try and get in, thinking you wanted to hurt yourself.
That was what I was at that point, yeah.
He said that he found the house locked and empty and had no way of contacting Rachel's parents. And so instead, he drove to Boston to catch a flight to England.
It wasn't the right thing to do, was it?
What, to leave and go to England?
Neil Entwistle's mention of his father-in-law's gun gave detectives the critical lead they'd been looking for.
You know, that's what you did.
Yeah.
As soon as the phone call was over, officers were sent to seize Joe Matarazzo's gun collection. Tests quickly revealed that the bullet which killed Lillian had come from Mr. Matarazzo's .22 caliber revolver. And so from the outset, because of what he'd said in that phone call, detectives knew that Neil Entwistle had lied.
I don't know what to tell you.
His whole world had become unraveled. He was not responsible for that. In the state of mind that he was in, he would be inconsistent in his explanations.
By the time of the trial, Neil Entwistle's story had changed. Where before the killer had been a mysterious intruder, now the defense were ready to name the murderer.
Hard, cold, objective evidence pointed to one shooter and one shooter only, and that was Rachel.
In this second scenario, when Neil returned home that Friday morning, he'd found Joe Matarazzo's gun beside Rachel on the bed.
Neil Entwistle claims that Rachel took her own life and killed their baby girl, and that to protect her honor, he picked up the gun and he brings it back to Carver, returns it to the gun case, all to protect his wife's name, her memory.
Suicide is still a big taboo. People do not talk about this. It is hard to deal with. It's unimaginable, and then when you factor in a little baby being shot, it's unfathomable.
Was it even possible for Rachel to shoot both the baby and herself?
She's cradling the baby girl, and you've got to take this long-barreled pistol, turn, and shoot the baby. The quote that I'll never forget is it macerated. It means it liquefied the child's internal organs. So your baby is beginning to die in your arms. You only have one hand. You've got to take that long-barreled gun and somehow, shoot yourself just above the hairline while cradling your baby.